Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst, and it is Wednesday, July 7th, also known as the day that New York City has a presumed new mayor coming. As of this morning, Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough president, has been named the presumptive mayor of New York City. That being said, because there is a general election, but New York registered voters are overwhelmingly Democrats compared to Republicans and independents. And it is very, very likely that the next mayor of New York will be Eric Adams. He came up 1 point above. This is after most of the absentee ballots were finally cast after quite a bit of dysfunction over at the New York City Board of Elections. He came up 1 point above Catherine Garcia, who is the sanitations department, was the former head of the sanitations department in New York City. Big surprise for a lot of folks that she did so well. Really stood out after the New York Times endorsed her. She was in several places behind Eric Adams and Andrew Yang and others, including Scott Stringer, until that endorsement by the New York Times. It's amazing. She trailed him by about 9,000 votes in the final round of ranked choice voting. As you guys know, ranked choice voting, this is the first time New York City had ranked choice voting. And it was quite a debacle. To say the least, because the New York City Board of Elections, which has been full of nepotism and minor corruption and no-show jobs and friends of friends and family members of elected officials, they have received criticism from pretty much every single faction of New York politics and beyond. People have called for the New York City Board of Elections to be gutted. Some say it's just the top that has the problems. It is not the workers at the New York City Board of Elections. But one thing is really clear. They were not ready for ranked choice voting, and they're not usually ready for any elections. So on July 6th, that is last night, the ranked choice final round tabulation showed Eric Adams at 50.5% and Catherine Garcia at 49.5%. On election night, with first place votes only, Eric Adams was at 31.66%. Maya Wiley was at 22.22%. Catherine Garcia was at 19.48%. Andrew Yang at 11.66%. Scott Stringer, who is the city's comptroller, the only person in the race to hold citywide office, was at 5.03%. Diane Morales was at 2.78%. Ray McGuire, former head of Citibank, 2.31%. Sean Donovan, the former housing secretary, was at 2.16%. And Paperboy Prince was at 0.43%. Art Chang, 0.73%. Those are pretty much there's a few more to go on. That was from election night compared to the final tabulation. So there you have it. New York City has a new mayor. For others, I think that people are trying to keep up, who are outside of New York City, to keep up with what's happening here. There were a few other announcements that came in because, of course, they had to do all the citywide races and the city council races on the same day. Some surprises, some not so much, but big night for the WFP. Big couple of weeks, I should say, for the WFP. The borough president's race has come in, and for different borough presidents in Brooklyn, for instance, Antonio Reynoso, who was endorsed by WFP, got 28.16% above Joanne Simon, a council member, at 17.61%. Robert Cornegie, who's also a council member, at 19.15%. And then a few others. It was a very crowded field. And that was with 96.85% of the scanners reporting. In Manhattan, Mark Levine came in at 53.7% above Brad Holman. So this is, I think people are a little, they weren't surprised, but the ranked choice turned out to be a little bit different because it was much tighter, a little bit tighter, at least I should say, looking at the election night results. But it, turns out that for the most part, most of those who, with exception to Queens, I'm looking at the results right now, with exception to Queens, most of the winners ended up making it as into the first place on the first round of voting. I don't see any standout as I'm looking at the numbers right now, any difference. Everybody who came in first on election night came in first as the ranked choice went in, which is what many people have been saying. Does ranked choice voting really create a scenario in which the underdog can win? And I think in states like Maine and states that have open primaries, it is much easier to make that argument. I think in cities like New York City, where it's low turnout, it very much depends on machines organizing for you, unions organizing for you, neighborhoods and endorsements. It might be a little bit more of a horse race battle. This is what we're going to have to figure out in the weeks to come, the months to come, the years to come as we analyze this data. Of course, it does help that there was matching funds of 8-1 if somebody opted in. So that does make the playing field a little bit easier. It's how somebody like a Ray McGuire, the former head of Citibank, or Sean Donovan, who comes from a very wealthy family, how they didn't do so well because others were able to compete with the matching funds, including Catherine Garcia. So it's definitely an interesting scenario. It's one for a political scientist to delve into and really assess. We'll have many weeks to discuss what kind of mayor Eric Adams will be. Just a reminder to folks, he is a former policeman, an officer in New York City. He joined the police force after thinking that he could reform the police force. He did push forward many reforms or argued for many reforms, I should say, advocated for them within the police force, and afterwards, maybe not to our liking, but this is because as a child, as a teenager, he was beaten by cops with his brother. So it definitely has shaped the way he sees the world. He is tied with real estate and big business, as most New York politicians have been, maybe until recently, for those who wanted to appear to be more progressive. But I don't think anybody who ran for mayor, every single person who ran for mayor supported Hillary Clinton. Let's just put that in perspective, including those who are on the progressive side. Actually, quite a few of them on the progressive side criticized Bernie Sanders. So is this a progressive era in New York? I think we're seeing that more at the city council level. I think we're seeing that more at the local level. I think we're seeing that more in the state Senate and even in the assembly. But we still have a lot of work to do. I think that is what is important, is that Eric Adams showed us, and this election showed us, that we as progressives have a lot of work to do, to making sure that those who are running as progressives are really living up to being progressives, not just changing shapes and forms in time for an election that carves out a lane for them to be the progressive candidate. What is it going to take for us to get a true progressive candidate in office at the mayor level? Are we going to be looking back in a couple of years and thinking to ourselves, maybe Mayor de Blasio wasn't so bad? All right, we have a great show today. As you guys know, we have a 2-hour show. We are now doing the show Wednesdays and Fridays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. You're going to get longer interviews. You're going to get more content at once. Same amount of content we've been offering from the get-go, but it's very exciting for us. And if you didn't know, I am actually in Greece right now. We're going to be covering a conference next week with the committee's own Arun Chowdhury. We are going to be in the same place at the conference talking about leftist politics globally. We're super excited to do this if Wi-Fi works. That is always the question when you're traveling. But stick around. We have Luke Savage up first. He's going to be talking about how Hillary Clinton and her machine is taking on Nina Turner in Ohio and why they don't want Nina to win. I don't think we're surprised by this, but it is important to discuss. And then later we have Jordan Zakarin, who will be talking about the New York City election results, what it means. We're going to delve in a little bit more. And then later on, after that, we are going to do our panel with Natalie Shure and Napoleon da Legend. So we'll be right back after this brief little break with Luke Savage. All right. Luke Savage is, of course, a staff writer over at Jacobin, and he is the host of Michael and Us. He has a piece out as of yesterday in Jacobin titled, "Hillary Clinton Wants Nina Turner to Lose." And as I said during our little break, Luke, it's the little machine that could. This machine won't die. Why? I mean, let's just start with this, because her record is like not great. So is it for fundraising? Is it to like, what is this signaling? Like, it doesn't work. Does she really think it works? Hillary?
I think Hillary Clinton's own intervention in the race, for what it's worth, is perfectly sincere in a sense. I mean, I think that, her endorsement quickly got, I think most people received it, I think rightly, as kind of a, as a personal intervention. She's intervened in these cases before, I think, where you have a kind of, Sanders endorsed candidate, and here the personal dynamics are pretty difficult to overlook. But, it's ironic that the piece was called Hillary Clinton Wants Nina Turner to Lose, because the catalyst for me writing it was really, not just Hillary Clinton endorsing Nina Turner's opponent, Shontel Brown, but Jim Clyburn jumping in as well, because I think that's what took this from, a kind of 2016 re-litigation type thing to something that I think in many ways has dynamics similar to the primary between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, but actually, has dynamics at play that go beyond the personal. So that's kind of what the piece is exploring.
Well, I mean, when I saw that Jim Clyburn endorsed, I immediately thought, all politics is local. I mean, especially in these special elections, how many people know who their own Congress member is, let alone Jim Clyburn? But simultaneously, it does create a dynamic in which maybe Shontel Brown can raise some more money so that she can close it out or get more press. And then suddenly someone like a Hillary Clinton can come in, and then Shontel Brown can do ads with her and Hillary Clinton, or, you know how it rolls. It's not necessarily because Jim Clyburn can move votes in Ohio. It's more that he can move people and power, money into Shontel Brown's race. Is there any indication that that's what's happening with Shontel Brown, that there's this, I mean, we know that Nina Turner was able to raise some money off of it, but does it seem like Shontel Brown has been able to do so?
Yeah, well, in fact, Turner reportedly raised $100,000 after the Hillary Clinton endorsement, and apparently another $100,000 after the Clyburn endorsement. So yeah, she's been able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think your assessment of kind of Clyburn's role is exactly right. And I think that if you look at the reporting that Julia Rock and David Sirota at the Daily Poster did on this, you can, I mean, it's not very hard to connect the dots and see that, Clyburn, who is a leading recipient, or as of 2018, he was the leading recipient of pharmaceutical donations from donations from the pharmaceutical industry of any member of Congress, a title that or distinction that I think he still holds to this day, although I could be wrong about that. But Turner's embrace of Medicare for All legislation, which she's run on the idea pretty strongly, and Brown, I think it was a day after the Clyburn endorsement, held a fundraiser with there was a registered lobbyist for the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. There's which is involved in a nationwide campaign against Medicare for All. This is the kind of money that you're able to tap when you are a Democratic candidate who's, standing against somebody who's campaigning on Medicare for All. This is kind of where the money goes and how the machinery kind of swings when that's the case. And I think it's so reminiscent, and I'm sure it reminds you as well, of the dynamic we saw in 2016, where kind of on the surface there were all these very personal kind of arguments, and there was kind of the meta theatrics of the debates between Clinton and Sanders and stuff. But a lot of us understood that what was really going on was that much of the machinery that makes up the Democratic Party on a day-to-day basis was kind of swinging against the candidate who was running against it, which Turner is very much doing as Sanders did twice. And so I think that's really more what we're seeing here. There is a relitigation of 2016, but it's not quite the relitigation people think exactly, because I don't think Hillary Clinton's endorsement, her endorsement probably matters all that much to the people of Northeastern Ohio.
I'm looking at this endorsement list right now, and of the endorsements, Chantel Brown, of course, Secretary Hillary Clinton. You've got some congressional members from different parts of the country. Okay, fine. Maryland, Illinois, New Jersey, Florida, Louisiana, California. Okay, here we go. Joyce Beatty from Ohio, who is the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Fascinating. Okay, that's one Ohio endorsement. You have two state reps, a couple of county executives and former mayors and former prosecutors. But for the most part, there aren't that many local endorsements. Richard Cordray, of course, is former Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but also, was the Ohio State Treasurer and Attorney General. But for the most part, it doesn't seem to be overwhelmingly local. But there's the but, okay? I'm looking here at Chantel Brown's endorsements and I see local unions. Mm-hmm. And this is what seems like it could make a difference compared to, Senator Turner definitely has some big endorsements. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, Ed Markey, the Squad, Cori Bush, Mondaire Jones, Jamal Bowman, basically everybody who's progressive in Congress and a few others. But the former chair of the Democratic Party in Ohio. She has current state senators, the minority leader. I mean, she really does seem to have several local endorsements for electeds and unions and the newspaper, the Plain Dealer. This makes a huge, this kind of stuff moves elections. Look at New York City. People love to say endorsements don't matter.
Yeah, I think endorsements, they can actually carry great weight, and they're also, depending on the source, and they're also very indicative of where all kinds of things are moving, both locally and nationally. I do think the national dynamic in the race is a pretty striking one. And again, this is where the kind of 2016, this is where I was getting flashbacks to 2016. I think the race is interesting not only because it has these obvious parallels to 2016, but because it highlights the dynamic that 2016, I feel like, really brought to light for people, going forward. It's one that a lot of people who I think were perhaps radicalized by the 2016 primaries have really taken to heart. And, what you're seeing is basically a progressive candidate running on, a very popular, among other things, a very popular agenda item, Medicare for All. This is not just popular nationally. It's actually, according to local polling, very popular in the district. As Sirota and Rock pointed out in their piece for the Daily Poster, this is a district that has sent, Democrats to Washington for the better part of 30 years who support single payer legislation. Turner is, she's not imposing some, chaotic or marginal kind of issue on, the voters of the Ohio 11th. This is it's a very popular policy with this electorate. What we're seeing is the machinery of the Democratic Party swinging to, impose a, candidate, a more conservative candidate. This, I feel like, could anything better represent the kind of circular logic that, we're often subjected to in relation to this stuff. A lot of Democrats they're not always comfortable. Hillary Clinton kind of wavered back and forth on this, but they're not always comfortable directly attacking the policies that they oppose, right? Often they have to invent these kind of, meta reasons, these kind of secondary reasons, for why something can't happen. The problem with Medicare for All is, well, that it would be great, but you could never get it through Congress or something like that. You often hear that kind of stuff. And Chantel Brown, for what it's worth, has taken a very confusing position on the issue. She said that she wouldn't vote against it if it got to the floor, but then she, if she was elected and it got to the floor of the House, but she's also said she's against it because it would take away people's private insurance. And so once again, we have this dynamic where Democratic centrists and establishment figures kind of say that things like Medicare for All aren't popular. They won't get the votes in Congress, that kind of thing. But then they actively work to impose more conservative candidates on all districts, but districts like this in particular. The Ohio 11th is not a conservative district. In fact, according to one study I found, it's it's number 21, ranks number 21 on the list of most Democratic districts of all Democratic districts. It's in terms of voter preference. It's D plus 32. It voted for Hillary Clinton for more than 80% in 2016. So this is a solidly Democratic district. And there's just there's simply no it's one where people support Medicare for all. There's simply no reason to have a more conservative candidate there. Unless your primary objective is to make sure that an issue like Medicare for all doesn't get more visibility and doesn't get more votes in Congress.
Okay, so this is a D plus 32 district. This is or D plus 30 something district. It's an extremely Democratic district, but it's also a district that the Democratic machine more or less has been operating in for a long time. So being a very blue district doesn't necessarily always mean it's the most progressive, or they may value the progressive items on the agenda, like may support Medicare for all. They may support, fully funding public schools, but might align more with the institutional Democrats out of just familiarity or, many other issues. And you see this in New York all the time too. It's kind of the pathway for Eric Adams. So how do we see those dynamics playing out with Senator? I mean, she's also been elected before, so she has name ID locally as well. How do we see this playing out?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think in many ways, the dynamics you see in places like California, New York, or in a district like this, which, as we've said, is an extremely blue district, kind of tells you where, it sort of gives lie to a lot of the arguments you hear from kind of centrist Democrats, establishment Democrats, about how the reason that they can't do things is because of Republican obstruction. Mm-hmm. That obviously applies in this district. It applies in, heavily in somewhere like New York, where there were solid Democratic majorities, and what did Andrew Cuomo do? He formed a special caucus, with Republicans, so they could pass, Republican budgets, and nobody makes powerful Democrats, do this stuff. They do it because a lot of the machinery in which they're embedded wants them to do this, and because many of them, want to do this stuff as well. So there's a really great chapter in Thomas Frank's book, Listen Liberal, where he talks about the blue state model. And the Ohio 11th special election is a good example of the blue state model in action. You can have a solidly blue district, but the machinery will still work to contain the progressive elements within that district. It will still work to try to get a more conservative candidate, even though there's there's no kind of electability argument or anything around, a district that's this solidly Democrat. But they'll still work to do that, anyway. And you see this play out again and again in California, New York, wherever. Who can forget, some of Hillary Clinton's other endorsements, Elliot Engel being, over Jamal Bowman. I don't think I'm making this up. Perhaps you can correct me, but I believe she also endorsed Joe Crowley over AOC.
I assume nobody even cared. From what I recall, it was never considered to be any sort of serious race for him. He didn't even show up to the debates. He wasn't even in district. I live right there. People were like, who? Yeah. So she found she found somebody, but this is not a district in which the candidate is going to be sleeping. So I'm curious because they see Nina coming, and not to mention they know Nina because Senator Turner was part of the Democratic Party when she was in office, and she was on Ready for Hillary, and had a big kind of separation from them, and then went to Bernie, but. I think what I'm really curious about with this race, and there's several months from now until then, is why is it that knowing very well that Senator Nina Turner is from that district, and knowing very well the dynamics, and I served on a commission with both Senator Turner and Marcia Fudge, knowing very well that Marcia Fudge could be vacating this, why did Joe Biden appoint Marcia Fudge to be Secretary of Housing and Urban Development? I mean, it just seems like it's a very odd scenario.
I don't have any theories on that score, really. I don't know a great deal about Marcia Fudge, but I mean, for what it's worth, I don't get the sense that the Democrats have been particularly organized in their effort to stop Turner. It seems like it's kind of been a bit of a late scramble. And I mean, the only poll we've seen of the race had her solidly ahead, although I think it was a poll commissioned by her campaign. So we'll have to see. Yeah.
And it's important to mention that. I'm glad you mentioned it, because the polls can sometimes be self-fulfilling prophecies if they're done too early, there's lots of different factors. So, but listen, they're calling in the big guns, I guess you could say, and are scared about what could potentially happen. But simultaneously, I think the race is probably tighter with so much union support. So it's a special election. You never know, right? That's the key part here. Do you have any sense of how these districts have performed or other races have performed when there has been a special election that kind of overlap with the district in terms of modeling? Has anybody given you any information on that?
On the polling and how accurate it is?
Well, no. So when there's a special election, oftentimes, it doesn't mean that there's been one in that district for that race, but there are likely other elections that are similar where you can kind of overlap the data and the modeling and say like, okay, well, we have a sense that this percentage of people will turn out for the special election based on previous special elections in this district for other seats added to off years, et cetera. Like there's kind of all this modeling that they do. Has anybody discussed that? Have you heard any?
I was unable to find much polling on it. So I'm really not sure. I think you're right that it's probably tighter than that initial poll suggested, but I haven't seen any kind of comparative studies or anything like that. So I think mostly what we have to go on is the fact that, Turner clearly had a big lead and a lot of momentum. And she's clearly got, I think her fundraising is pretty indicative of the momentum that she does have. But because there's been this kind of late swing by the Democratic machinery, both nationally and locally, I think you're right. It probably is closer than I don't think Turner's going to win by 40 points or something like that. But we'll have to wait and see.
It's the election is on August 3rd. It's a special election. And of course, she goes on to run for the general, whoever wins will go on to the general election. But in as you said, a very Democratic district. Luke, super interesting. Thanks to writing this piece. We need to use this as a model because this is their game plan. They don't keep it a secret. It's like, we know what's coming. So what do we do to prepare? And, vice versa. They know what we do and what are they doing to prepare for us? So appreciate it and hope to have you on again very soon.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. See you again.
Jordan Zakarin is back. One-on-one with Jordan Zakarin. He is the media producer for A More Perfect Union. And of course, he is the founder of the Progressives Everywhere newsletter that spotlights progressive candidates, campaigns, and causes. Jordan is based in New York, and the two of us are just going to chat about our likely new mayor, Eric Adams. Most New Yorkers learned this morning that Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, former NYPD captain, is most likely going to be mayor of New York City. So my immediate thoughts on this whole thing, looking at the analysis of all of the ranked choice outcomes for the most part, at least citywide and borough-wide. I heard someone say this when ranked choice voting first passed, and somebody who's progressive saying, be careful, because this is not an open primary state or city. And so what's likely to happen is it's going to create a scenario in which machines are going to be able to boost their candidates and do behind the scenes horse trading. And that could be progressive machines, or it could be, old fashioned Democratic machines, but matching it with matching funds. What is interesting is you see at least one thing is good. The billionaires didn't win out. Right. Because they couldn't just buy the election. But the first round matched in every single race that I looked at who ended up being the winner. So are we not getting ranked choice fully? Is it not? Does it seem to work under some circumstances, like in Maine with open primaries, but not in New York where, the Democratic machine can still operate?
I thought of the thing I thought about. Well, first of all, mayoral election. Eric Adams, who's going to be the weirdest mayor we've had in a very long time. He won by 1 point right now. Well,
Really?
I'm not good weird, but he's a weirdo.
Rudy Giuliani is pretty freaking weird.
Rudy's
Mayor de
really
Blasio hang on. Sorry, this is a story. I can tell because it's going. I followed Mayor de Blasio around for a day. It was a really interesting day, I should say.
Sure.
But when we had lunch, this is what I was reporting, he was eating his spanakopita with a knife upside down the whole entire time. That was weird to me.
Right. Mayor de Blasio is a goofball. Rudy Giuliani is an insane person.
Okay.
Eric Adams is a weirdo. He speaks in the third person. He brought people on a tour of his son's apartment that he swore was his. He's strange. He's not a good person. I'm not excited for him to be mayor. He's a weirdo. I'll say that. So there's different levels. So I think that, he won by 1 point, ranked choice.
Yeah.
So ranked choice nearly did bail us out. You came very close.
With
and I think
Catherine Garcia, who's
right, not great. But I do think that reason Eric Adams won, A, machine, like you mentioned, but B, I don't think it's so much the problem of ranked choice or anything like that. I think what it is that every progressive candidate or so-called progressive or someone that was to his left blew up. I think that for the most part, I think that Andrew Yang got all the attention and criticism and allowed Eric Adams to sort of slide under the radar for a long time. Andrew Yang just totally blew up. And I think that had it not been for, I think, Adams is a stronger candidate in the sense that he's, been in New York forever and that he had a machine behind him. But I think that a lot of things, he was the one who was Curtis Mayfield. I loved the concert where he got paralyzed and died. That's weird. Did you hear that? Were you on the road during that time?
I don't even know what that means.
All right. So someone, side point, Eric Adams, this is another reason why he's weird. Someone asked him his favorite, some fluff piece. What's your favorite concert you've ever been to? He's like, well, I was at this one where lightning struck and hit something and it dropped on Curtis Mayfield's head and it paralyzed him. He soon died afterwards. But before that, it was a great show. Yeah. Which is the ultimate, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you enjoy the show? But yes, that's
exactly what that was.
Yeah. It's the ultimate. So, I think that we almost avoided Eric Adams' mayoralship because of ranked choice. And I think that he won not because of any sort of machine so much as that, look, I don't know if Scott Stringer is an actual progressive, but he was the choice of progressive lawmakers, whether it's, quid pro quo. He supported a lot of people running in 2018. He was the Working Family Party's choice. He was, a lot of people's choices, young progressive lawmakers. He blew up. He had his problems. His past came back to get him. Dianne Morales, who enjoyed for a second support, turned out to be a total fraud. She enjoyed internet support.
I don't like using the word fraud with women because fraud is a legal term. I'm just saying that.
She turned out to be not what she presented herself to be.
But again, that was, I've talked about this in the show before. We have to vet our candidate. Scott Stringer turned out to be somebody who we did not expect to be either, but everybody knew was. Right. That's the difference. Dianne Morales, it's called vetting. It's called, she voted for Andrew Cuomo a minute ago, and she voted for Hillary Clinton you're the WFP and you're supporting her. Why didn't you do your, I'm sorry, but
for sure.
That's called.
Oh, absolutely. So the point is that no progressive organization got behind, no one got behind Maya Wiley until the very, very, very end. And not that Maya Wiley was all that inspiring anyways. And so I think that Eric Adams benefited from just the total shit show around him, right? It was again, Yang, and then on the left, just the sort of just incompetence and, late breaking support for Maya Wiley. And she, if you look at it, she and Garcia still split the vote to the point where they would have, if one of them had consolidated support, they would have beaten Adams. I think the other thing is there were so many candidates in this race, and I think that's because of matching funds. I think it's because there's some deep-pocketed people that said, there's ranked choice. If I can get enough second and third choices, maybe I can get there. Someone like Sean Donovan or all these folks who stood no chance stayed in the race because they were getting money and they had a chance. They felt like they had a chance of ranked choice voting, considering no one's ever done it before. But I think that Eric Adams, his win, certainly he won, but I just don't think it's some great proof that New Yorkers and progressives and people desperately want a pro-cop weirdo. I think it's just a matter of that all these circumstances came together to help him. It's sort of
that's how all the races are, though. This is the one thing that I think people think that there's some sort of overwhelming. No, there's very low turnout for every election in New York. It's extremely low turnout, and It's not like there's a mandate. There was never a mandate for Bill de Blasio. You had an implosion situation with Bill de Blasio's race too. I mean, no one would have ever thought that he was going to be the mayor, a few months before. They thought maybe Anthony Weiner would. Well, that turned out to be, that was cute. I mean, same thing with Spitzer. Spitzer came back and people thought that Spitzer would be formidable against Scott Stringer, and Scott Stringer annihilated him.
Sure.
This is after Spitzer, the fall of Spitzer. So, and by the way, Spitzer was still really liked. It was like a very strange dynamic with Elliot Spitzer, why he was able to run again. Like, he did his own polling. So, the reason I bring this up is it's not that ranked choice voting is bad.
Right.
It's that when you have a confluence of all these different things, low turnout elections, when you have matching funds, which incentivize more candidates to run, and AKA their consultants are incentivizing them to run, when you have different political machines, sometimes putting up 2-3 candidates, by the way, at a time, to play off of each other and to protect each other. Because I think initially what was supposed to happen was someone like a Morales was supposed to offer cover for Scott Stringer. Mark
he could be not as left, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's also a white man, and how does it look when you're the progressives are pushing for a white man? But he was definitely, on stage, probably like, there was just it was strange. There's just people in that race who had no experience, sounded awkward on stage. Looking back at it, comparing this year to the de Blasio race, at least there were people running who were competent, who had a sense of how to turn the lights on at City Hall. I was watching, I don't know how you felt about this race, but I was just like, the city is spiraling out of control, and we've got a bunch of narcissists running. I think
that's why. Garcia got lifted by her New York Times endorsement, but she was able to say, "I've done things," and not that I was a huge fan of her, of her, but compared to anyone else that was running, I guess again I mentioned Donovan. He did things under Bloomberg. I wouldn't advertise my housing successes under Bloomberg if I was Sean Donovan, but
that's what he's known for. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a large field, but I think didn't think it was a particularly distinguished field. I think the person that people are most excited about is going to be comptroller, Brad Lander. People are really excited about on the progressive end. And I think that, I feel also that, no one could really go out and campaign for a long time, right? This was, most of the debates were held on Zoom, which is a horrible forum for it. And most of these things were happening online. People were not able to go door to door, shake hands. There was no field organization till the spring. And so I think that just, favors money, right? That favors machine candidates. And I think that, again, Adams won. He's going to be the mayor. It's going to be weird, probably not good in a lot of ways. But I wouldn't say, again, that it's not just a mandate. I wouldn't use it as a litmus test for what Democratic voters want throughout the cities. Is kind of the point I'm trying to make. So
simultaneously, we have a city council now that, this is historic and huge. City council is now the majority of the members are women. Yeah. And this has been an agenda item because there were so few city council members that were women 4 years ago. So you had, an organization pop up to push for more women to run. And let's be clear, not all of them are progressive, but the city council for the most part is fairly progressive. They don't do fairly progressive things. They all take, for the most part, real estate money and up until recently, NYPD, different police union money and other questionable monies. But it is definitely presumed to be more progressive than most city councils across the country. Sure. So what do we expect city council to act like in relationship to a Mayor Adams when it seems like at the local level, progressive politics is really starting to move, it's starting to move neighborhood by neighborhood?
Yeah, if you look at the city council, Tiffany Caban won, a bunch of people nearly won. DSA endorsed. It was a lot of races were really close. Even moderate women that won, like Linda Lee beating Jaslyn Kerr. She's not a far right. She might be a little more moderate, but she's not terrible. And so it depends on what the issues are. Will it be school? I think that's. They'll probably put up a big fight there, right? Eric Adams wanted to have 400 kids in a Zoom class or something. And so I think there's going to be a big issue there. I think we're not going to, in the same way de Blasio avoided any sort of real police reform, and they weren't able to really force him into it. I can't imagine that's going to wind up taking root. But I imagine it's going to be more combative than it is going to be with, it's de Blasio didn't really have control of the city council, but I don't know how much they weren't in lockstep with him. Corey Johnson's not going to be the speaker anymore, which is great. And Eric Adams, he's a vindictive person. So it'll be interesting to see how much power he thinks he has and how much people fear him, because he will remember back to 1980, someone that like ripped him off for $1 and he'll arrest them probably.
Be interesting. It's almost like we need a public advocate.
Yeah, with power.
Holds the mayor. Okay. No, they have power.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it depends if they want to use it, I think is the thing.
Okay, so but the reality is that we have this situation now where the city's in major crisis. We're about to have a new controller. We're about to have a new, entirely different city council. I mean, for the most part, the landscape and the priorities will undeniably shift. You're going to have a speaker's race coming up for city council speaker. Because Corey Johnson, of course, is run for comptroller, but is not going to be comptroller now, and he's a city council speaker. Have a new mayor. I mean, the entire makeup of the city is shifting while the Senate is shifting and has a more lefty caucus. The assembly is slowly shifting. We still have a governor who's being investigated right now in multiple different places. So if we think about like where New York has been for the last 8 years, everybody has been beholden to Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo's fighting and the machinations of Governor Cuomo. We have been stalled and frozen. And now coming out of this horrible crisis, there is opportunity, but it's like everybody has to figure out where their footing is. Right. Like, what are the dynamics? How do we do this? How are we going to, does Governor Cuomo have the ability to continue to control New York City the way he has? Where do you see us going?
I think the big thing is going to be housing, right? The eviction moratorium is going to end come the fall, right? And I think that in a way that I'm grateful that Andrew Yang didn't want that, because he had so many just big corporate and real estate people behind him. I don't think Adams is some angel and is going to build all public affordable housing, but I think that he also did win because he got a lot of working class voters, the middle class voters deep in the boroughs, and I think that makes him, if in any way, if he ever feels like he owes anyone anything, that hopefully is part of it. Hopefully, between that and the city council, that is going to be much less friendly to developers. Hopefully, I think that's going to be the big thing to watch, because look, police reform obviously is a huge, huge deal. I don't know how much is going to happen with, to be fair, Adams was about police reform, or at least pretended to be throughout much of his career. So there may be some he's not Curtis Silva, who's running around, with a big gun, saying that everyone should go to jail. So maybe there'll be some modest reform there, but I think it's going to be all about development. I think it's going to be all about trying to, make sure that there is real affordable housing. De Blasio, he was, he talked a big game about that. I think to some degree he was hamstrung by all the deals reached under Bloomberg, and I think the fact that the city council, Corey Johnson certainly was no opponent of developers. And I think that he was hamstrung in a lot of ways. De Blasio screwed up plenty on his own, especially when it comes to police stuff. Yeah. But I do think he was hamstrung a little bit when it comes to developers. And I think that 8 years out from that, and with so many, honestly, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. So many office buildings are losing tenants. So many of these developers, people who own the buildings, are in major debt or in danger of major debt. And I think that hopefully the city council
bailed out, Jordan. What are you talking about?
Hopefully, what I'm saying is, hopefully the city council can make the bailouts hurt a little bit, if anything, and use that advantage. Use that to their advantage. I think that a lot of these places where good progressives won, they were in places where gentrification is happening or is about to happen. And hopefully that can be, it's hard to stop gentrification fully, but hopefully that can be, changed. As I'm in Manhattan, and I actually have my new city councilwoman is the wife of Bruce Menon, the big developer. So that
Julie
was,
Menon,
so they put a lot of money behind her, but there's going to be pressure on everyone, I think, when it comes to, housing and the eviction crisis. And I think that the homeless, I don't want to say homeless, the unhoused issue is going to be big, and de Blasio screwed up on how he dealt with that. And I think that, I think that's going to be the real thing to watch. And
it's interesting because they're not going to be able to get away with the same stuff that they used to for a whole set of reasons. The economic crisis just, looking back just a couple of years ago, many of the progressives who ran this cycle for borough presidents, multiple seats, and who ran for other positions, who got progressive endorsements, were part of the rezonings. They were actual progressives, under many lines that are progressive, that rezone their neighborhoods without the approval of community boards, which is technically against the law in New York City. And so this used to happen all the time in New York City with progressives. So the fact that now we're in a situation in which no progressives are likely going to do this because people are watching and they can't get away with it with this economic crisis. Simultaneously, even more moderate I think there are going to be more moderates who just can't do that anymore. You can't just rezone your neighborhood and suddenly, have the Lower East Side turn into, a Crystal City, like in 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, there's Antonio Reynoso won in Brooklyn Borough president. He was a, big progressive endorsement. Mark Levine won in Manhattan. And hopefully that's helpful. And so there is, I think that, we're looking at housing prices, they're kind of going back and forth, but hopefully, maybe the fact that the suburbs continue to get more and more expensive, makes it possible, it's going to be impossible for people to kind of leave the city in some ways. So there's going to be a lot of fighting on it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully also with the state Senate, they're going to be able to work with each other in some other ways.
Yeah, and hopefully all the people who left for the Hamptons and Miami and all those places, when they try to come back, like they have some like mark on their passport, on their applications. They have to pay like a tax.
Oh my God. You want to tax rich people?
No, sorry, that was stupid.
Jordan.
Sorry.
You can't say those things out
delete
loud.
that. I don't want that to be associated with me.
Don't tax the rich people. Oh man, Jordan Zakarin, what are you working on right now? What's up at A More Perfect Union?
Oh, we got some big stuff going on actually. We are working on. Well, first I'm going to take down Elon Musk. That's like my first goal. No big deal.
Wait, you're taking him down before he gets to space, while he's launching to space, or when he's in space, or when he comes back?
Mid-flight. No.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, no.
Best lightning fireworks storm ever.
We're working on some stories about him and all the racism happening at the Tesla factories, and it's a big thing coming up soon. Also, there's a big strike that happened that's still ongoing. We have a video coming out today about it, about Frito-Lay in Kansas, Topeka, Kansas. They're making people work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, offering them 20-cent raises over the last decade or so. And it's absolutely brutal. And we have a video coming out on that. And this is in a place where there's warehouses for Amazon and Target that actually pay people better. It's worse than Amazon warehouses. That's how bad it is. The fact that
chips. Chips.
America's gonna have the chips.
We have to have our potato chips.
If you saw Biden's thing, prices went down like 6 cents. So that's big. You saw his big 4th of July post. We got something on that coming up. We got dollar store stuff coming up. There's they're trying to expand. There's 30,000 dollar stores in the United States.
I believe that.
Yes, 4.5 times more Targets and Walmarts combined. Wow. And so we're working on that. We got a lot of stuff in the hopper, and of course, voting rights. That is my personal passion. And we can't make them pass it, but we can make it painful for them to not pass it. So that's our big thing. Even just the compromise before the People Act is a start, because I think when we saw the Supreme Court, what happened last week, there's no way around it. And White House press secretary said that Biden's very, very focused on racial equity. He's very focused on racial equity. And but if he doesn't push his caucus to pass the For the People Act, he's going to be remembered as the Jim Crow president. There's no way around it. You can make all the executive orders you want, but if you have the power to pass these things and you don't, you're just as bad as people that pass voter suppression. So that is a big thing to watch. And in Texas, starting tomorrow, I'm not sure when this is broadcasting, but starting on Thursday, special session where they're going to look to pass the big voter suppression law that Democrats walked out on to stop. And so that will make it even more urgent. So I would watch what's happening down in Texas as they try to do that and try to ruin bail reform. They're going to make it even worse somehow, which is impressive, to be even worse in Texas jails. And so there's a lot going on in state governments that are still going on.
I think that we need to start a countdown clock for people to understand that we are going to lose the Senate and we have impossible Congress. And this is how many days we have to pass things. So Joe Biden, be the president.
One thing that struck me was a few weeks ago, I spoke and had in my newsletter, spoke with Juan Mendez, who's one of the state senators in Arizona. Great guy. And
I used to organize with him when I was a kid. Yeah,
awesome.
Seriously, when you said his name, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know him personally. We had some good conversations,
19,
but yeah. He was saying to me, he thought that, and I read this further being backed up, that Republicans in Arizona passed all this stuff, the ridiculous flat taxes, they call it, that just enabled taxes for rich to go down, and got rid of the big ballot initiative that raised taxes on the rich to fund education. That and voter suppression things they passed and everything else. He said they did it because they're not sure they're going to be in power going forward. The Democrats came very close to to winning the state Senate. They lost by 1 seat. Even with maybe some gerrymandering, they're going to put up a really good fight in 2022. And Republicans are like, we better get this done now. Doug Ducey's been promising it for a while. And I wish that Democrats in the U.S. Senate had that same thought.
It's almost like they don't understand or care about how this works.
Working on a big project on what the voter suppression rules and gerrymandering will actually do. Because I think if there's anything the Democrats in the Senate understand, it's trying to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more lucrative for them to be in the minority than it is to be in the majority at some point. And
but
getting
I
rid of the
think this
filibuster.
is where I honestly think, and we can talk about this another day, I think this is exactly where Schumer, I don't think Schumer doesn't want to be the majority leader. I think he understands the dynamic of how Democrats, yes, there's more money in it, and it's probably better for Joe Biden to have a Senate that's not in power. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Chuck Schumer wants to be in power.
Sure.
I can't see it otherwise.
Oh, yeah. I just don't know that every member of his caucus thinks that getting rid of the filibuster would be good for them in terms of their future as lobbyists and their financial contributions. But
I think almost like Chuck Schumer has power over them.
That's the thing. Mendez also said Sinema is not going to listen to any protester or activists. She doesn't care about public pressure. Probably makes her feel better, makes her feel good. It excites her. She's beyond. So it's got to be, he said, it's got to be from Biden. It's got to be from Schumer. I know Biden's meeting with civil rights leaders on Thursday, but unless they tell him to put a charge into people and he listens, placating people is not going to be enough.
It's all of these things. We should be protesting Senator Schumer because he's feeling the pain. He's, since when does just Senator Schumer go and sing "I Love New York" on the streets of New York at like an ice cream shop or wherever in hell he was?
Yeah. So people in Park Slope, do your part. Go to Senator Schumer's house, bug him. And it's, there are lots of protests happening in West Virginia and Arizona. There's veterans groups in West Virginia. There's, lots of, the African-American population is not huge in West Virginia, but it's 30% of the Democratic Party. Manchin's not going to win without them.
Exactly.
I think that needs to be very clear because, Manchin wants to keep his power. I don't know what her deal is, but Manchin, I think he's probably more responsive and likely to flip than Sinema. Which is crazy to say.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Here we go.
Manchin,
all right, Jordan, let's talk about this next time.
Guy. All right.
I love this. Jordan Zakarin, go check out More Perfect Union. Doing great work. The Lord's work. Following all these states and things.
Yes.
Seriously, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, what? Do you read like a newsletter in every single state every single day? But I mean, it's great work.
Well, it's I'm spread very thin, but I'm glad to be here. And at least in New York, we can let's try and make some better things happen in New York this year.
Yes. I think we can do it.
All right.
All right. Take care, Jordan.
You too.
Okay, guys, you might be able to tell that I'm a little low energy because it is 7 p.m. where I am, and it is not 7 p.m. where Jordan and everybody else is, including Luke. And I am dealing with still jet lag because this is the rule that I've learned. The rule that I've learned is that I think I got this right. Jet lag works this way. For every hour difference on the flight is how many days it'll take for you to get over your jet lag. And I have not made it yet. And it hit me hard yesterday because even though I took my CBD, I woke up and for 3 hours, I was just watching the sunrise, which is great because it was really early in the morning and lovely. But I had to take my CBD and the CBD did help. Of course, I'm talking about Sunset Lake CBD. Sunset Lake CBD is the CBD that has changed my life. It's a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm to your door. Sunset Lake CBD has all types of products, salves, gummies, tinctures, coffee, and they all help with stress, aches, and pains, and sleep deprivation. It was originally a dairy farm in Vermont. It was the Ben & Jerry's dairy farm, and they switched it over. They diversified, now grow premium hemp. Premium hemp, you can also smoke the hemp, which is fun. Helps my migraines, which I've not had in the last few weeks. I gotta say, there's something to be said about fresh air. They are a great company. Their employees own the majority of their company. They pay a $15 minimum wage, and they invest and support independent media like our show, like The Majority Report and The David Pakman Show. I love the tincture, as I mentioned. It travels well. You can also do the dog biscuits if you're into eating dog biscuits as a human. I'm kidding. They have fudge. They've got all sorts of products. Go check them out. And with that, if you go on their website, at sunsetlakecbd.com, and you type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, you will get 20% off of your entire order. When you type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, you get 20% off of your entire order. Pretty exciting. So go check out sunsetlakecbd.com. All right, guys, we are back with our amazing panel. We have Natalie Shure on again. She's back. She's a writer and she does amazing research. She focuses on history, health, and politics. You've seen her in The Nation, The Atlantic, BuzzFeed, Slate, Jacobin, Daily Beast, She was formerly the head of research for Adam Ruins Everything. She's super smart. She's got her facts ready to go. And it's true. We know this. And Napoleon da Legend is an Afrobeat hip hop artist. We love him. He's part of our former reoccurring panel as well. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you.
Happy to be here.
Okay, I wish we were talking about better things, but we just have another climate disaster. Apocalyptic scenes we've all seen on the internet as the ocean is on fire in the Gulf of Mexico. After an underwater pipeline burns. Let's just play this clip so everybody can see it in case you've missed it. You've been hiding. Okay, so obviously something like this is jarring and has made the rounds on the internet, but it has also created another opportunity for everybody to discuss climate action and climate change. And, Republicans, of course, in denial and pointing at centrist Democrats for being hypocrites, and the progressives just hitting their heads against the wall and, basically plotting out our demise. Jackie Fielder has criticized Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom tweeted out a little bit earlier this week that the ocean is literally on fire, but yeah, sure, we can't afford climate change. And Jackie Fielder said, you signed literally 1,709 oil and gas permits. So at what point are we going to move past this? I know we talk about climate all the time, but there is a lot of truth to this. I mean, there's the hypocrisy at the executive level of so many different states, at the Senate level, of course. How can we move past this? Where is it that a Democrat, a centrist Democrat, or whatever you want to call it, because Gavin Newsom got the endorsements of many progressive organizations as well, where do we move them? How are we able to move them on things that are just so catastrophic at this point? Napoleon, I'm going to start with you because I feel like in Europe, there's more, especially in Germany, there's a little bit more space there.
Well, overall in Europe, there's a general consensus and acceptance of the fact that climate change is happening. And you see a lot of things where a lot of awareness you see on ads or different things where people are doing certain things and talk about the earth and climate change and things like that, that when I was in America, I wasn't really seeing. And it's, I think it comes down to the realization, either we have to put the fossil fuel companies out of business or force them to drastically change their business, and who has the courage to do it. I don't know if centrist Democrats are ever going to be on board because I take it that's where they get their money from. And I think that's the deep problem that in this issue that a lot of people don't want to talk about or they don't want to directly tackle, the fact that there's a small group of people getting rich and everybody in the planet is facing the consequences of it.
Okay, and I understand this because obviously we've been talking about this. I think I'm just sick of having the same conversation over and over as a host. I'm just there's another climate thing. I'm asking the same questions over and over. It's on repeat. But I really do ask, how do we change the strategy? Because as wonderful as some of these new organizations are out there, the tactics are not working. They're just not working. We have the Senate, we have Congress, we supposedly have this president who's, acknowledging climate change, getting back. I get a slow who's reestablishing our positioning globally when it comes to acknowledging climate change, but something is not working. And I don't know what the tact is. It's not showing up in the streets. So Natalie, I mean, what do we have to do? Is Sunrise not doing enough? Is Justice Democrats not doing enough? Is it just electoral? Like, where are we missing it? You have sinkholes in Florida and New York. You have buildings being collapsing. I mean, what else does it take?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And we've certainly gotten beyond the point where, all we have to do is come up with a really good argument that will convince a centrist Democrat. And to your point, I think that the answer is Sunrise Movement and Justice Democrats, the squad, everyone that we agree with, through the labor movement, they have to build worker power so that we can challenge the fundamental power structure that people have a vested interest in that makes them not want to confront climate change, right? Like, this goes way beyond people getting donations from a few fossil fuel executives. We're talking about, we have to rejigger how the economy is organized and the people that it benefits. And so I think that building worker power to be able to take that on is the path forward as I see it. And of course, we don't have a lot of time. We have a few years. So I think that the climate change movement and the labor movement really have to get on the same page. And, hearteningly, I see that happening in a few quarters. So I hope that continues.
Yeah, there's the infrastructure bill, which we're going to move to in a second. It was a great opportunity for us to have that kind of alignment. But simultaneously, just from the international perspective, being international right now, what is it going to take for international leaders who are many different countries are facing the consequences of catastrophic decisions made in our country and others as well? It's not just us. What is it going to take for them to put pressure on Joe Biden to, enough, like, stop letting the rednecks doing the, excuse my language, calling people rednecks, but like the people's, I'm sorry, I don't want to become something, but the rednecks at the Walmart, singing God Bless America are literally controlling the climate disaster right now. Like, they're holding the whole world up right now.
I mean, this is going to need to be... There needs to be more aggressive diplomacy, I guess, or aggressive action. Like, somebody needs to finally hit the emergency button. Like, we need like Green New Deal, or planetary Green New Deal, whatever, American Green New Deal. But I think the pressure has to be put, like you said, internationally also as well, because it is a global problem. And whatever happens in France or whatever happens in Italy, if America keeps sticking to the same thing, we're still heading towards a disaster real fast. As far as strategy, I mean, I'm not sure what's the best strategy that they could take, but like the emergency button has to be pushed. And videos like this going around, I don't know how it doesn't scare everybody. I don't know how it doesn't like make people stop in their tracks and you're like, look, we're doing something very wrong here. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, I still don't think Americans get it. Like I'm taking Americans in a general sense. I just don't think they really get it. They're just going through living their life and not realizing like that this is real. This is serious, because they've been propagandized to not believe it and to think that it's not a great deal. And there's other people who are just running. They think apocalypse is about to happen anyway. So it falls into what they believe in anyway.
The apocalyptic people. No, but I mean, it does tie, all of this stuff is connected diplomatically. And so if our entire, foreign policy is rooted in some sort of geopolitical game over oil and gas, it is connected. And if the power, if everything, for instance, I'm in Greece right now, and the fact that the EU is doing absolutely nothing, just an example, I'm like staring at Turkey outside of my window. I can see Turkey from my window as I speak, right? I could flip the camera and you could see it. And Turkey is ready to exercise natural gas drilling, which is against international law in these waters, which could affect EU nations. And the EU is just like sitting there silently. I mean, here's a perfect example how diplomacy is failing. That is a climate issue. That's a geopolitical issue. I mean, all these things are, what do you think? Well, there's this turf war with Russia is over oil and gas. But ultimately, it is what frames everything. Correct me if I'm wrong, does it not frame everything for the neoliberal class that doesn't want to separate themselves from oil and gas because there's this other aspect, which is America first? Natalie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that climate change isn't typically thought of as, it's thought of as an international issue insofar as we all live on the planet. But, beyond things like the Paris Agreement, which I do think was important, and obviously there's a pretty shameful partisan side of that too. It's not thought of as something global in terms of, transcending our conception of the nation state in many ways. And I think that it really does highlight not only that it's important to have an international lens, but that it's important to think about oppression internationally. There's a reason that 100 years ago and more, leftists were saying workers of the world unite, right? Like they had a very international labor analysis. And I think that we need that. I think that we need to understand better what workers in the United States have in common with workers in Turkey, what they have in common with workers in Germany and in every other country, and that they have a lot more in common in a lot of ways, or they should, than they have with the executives in the United States and other powerful countries who, use the like Walmart shoppers that you're talking about for their bidding, use them to their ends. They're convenient because they help them get a governing majority. Those people aren't actually powering this and pushing it forward. It's, the richest people, the people who own capital, and they're the ones that need to be confronted in a global context.
But even from a geopolitical perspective, workers in Turkey are not able to apply the same pressure that workers in Germany are, and workers in France are, and workers in the US are, so from a geopolitical perspective. So if somebody like there's obviously coordination. There's an overlap between the Foreign Services Committee and who, for instance, who sits in these key positions and who takes the most oil and gas money from, U.S. companies. And that's purposeful for a lot of reasons. Napoleon, do you think that people are looking at climate from a geopolitical perspective on this side of the pond? Meaning the side of the pond that I'm on with you?
That's a good question. I think they are a lot more than Americans because they're I listen to a few shows like French shows where they interview geological experts and all types of scientists and people in politics. And what I didn't perceive being in America was how much actually Americans influence countries like France and the government. And because some of the guests in that shows were saying how some of the officials, like in the French government or in certain institutions in France, are actually working for the Americans. Or they're not saying it outright, but they're suspecting that, why are they not looking out for our interests? It seems like they're looking at the lens from America's perspective, as in they've been infiltrated, talking about them kind of as if they were moles. I'm hearing this from people in positions, people that were in the administration in France and things like that. So I don't know. I think it has to do with the American hegemony and the whole neoliberal agenda having more of a control than we could, I think, perceive just from the outside looking in.
Or a multinational corporation agenda versus Russian state agenda, which is another.
Exactly. And to add to that, it's just like Facebook, Amazon, and companies like that, which are so powerful even outside of America, but they're American companies. And a lot of these companies are backed up by the state of America, the Department of State and things like that. And that's an issue that they talk about a lot. Why are we letting people in France let Facebook get our information, do things like that? But it seems like I'm going outside of climate, but I'm not, because we're just talking about foreign policy and geopolitical strategies and things like that. And that has to do with American being allowed to run business as usual and not look for climate change solutions or things to change the status quo and getting the same people rich.
Right. And I mean, these are multinational corporations that have interests in multiple countries and obviously tax incentives in some countries versus other countries. But, you know, there's definitely like the spread of misinformation. You know, Facebook in some countries spreads information more than other countries because of standards, because of culture, because of a lot of different, you know, dynamics, which I think affects, you know, climate awareness as well. I want to shift gears a little bit because back to the States, because Mehdi Hasan, who has a show on MSNBC, he thinks that centrist Democrats and Joe Biden specifically is not using the bully pulpit enough to take on the Republican Party. Shocker. But, you know, fair enough. I'm glad he's saying this on MSNBC. Let's play this clip.
So you've got this For the People Act, right? You couldn't get Manchin on board. Then you get Manchin on board with a compromise, which, okay, fine. Stacey Abrams says, it's great. Let's do it. Then Mitch McConnell and all the Republicans turn around and say, oh, it's a Stacey Abrams bill. We can't touch that. But even if you got rid of the filibuster, as Ellie's pointed out, and you passed this thing, the Roberts Court's sitting there waiting in the wings, like absolutely hacking to death. It's like, what are we doing here?
Indeed. Let me just address one quick point between you and Ellie a moment ago, and I get both sides of the argument. I think Ellie's right that they can't win without changing these rules. You're right that they're more competitive than people think. But look, the key fact is this. It's been 31 years since a Republican president won the White House with the popular vote at the first attempt. Right? That is a long time. They know that. They're not stupid. They cannot win the White House. Forget Congress, the House, which all sorts of gerrymandering, the Senate, which has all sorts of disproportionality. They know they can't win the top office very easily. To come back to your point about Manchin and the Senate, I mean, number one, the idea that they're going to reject a compromise because Stacey Abrams' name is on it comes back to Ellie's point. Could they just stop being racist for even 4 days, let alone 4 years? Number two, when is Joe Manchin going to have his awakening? Maria Theresa mentioned. I don't know. I mean, I've said Joe Manchin's name more times in 2021 than maybe I've said my 2 kids and my wife's name. I am, like Bernie Sanders, I'm fed up of saying Joe Manchin's name and Kirsten Sinema's name. But I just don't understand when they will get it, what it will take for them to get it. We were told that when they try and do a deal, when they bring something bipartisan and it fails, they will see the light. Well, we saw it on S1 where Manchin got on board with a reasonable compromise. I am no fan of Joe Manchin, but the stuff he offered was reasonable. It was a building block for something better than nothing. And yet he couldn't get a single Republican on board. Even his John Lewis bill that he says is the more important bill than the For the People Act, he has one Republican on board, Lisa Murkowski, as far as I can see. So I don't know when they're going to have their realization. I think the point is that they're never going to have their realization because it's never been about a good faith argument on their part. Forget the Republicans in good faith. I've mentioned this on the show before. Kirsten Sinema in 2010. There's a video, gone viral online. She's saying in 2010, we must forget about the false option of 60. We must use budget reconciliation for good, as Republicans did.
Natalie, why even put forward this bill if you know you're not going to get enough Republicans at all? What's the point? Is it to drag it out? I mean, I don't know. They're going to end up having to choose one side or the other at some point. It's why not instead of dragging it out, you know very well, creating an alternate bill, a bipartisan bill, and you know very well you're going to get a certain number of votes, and shocker, you didn't get them. What is the point of even going through this dog and pony show?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that Joe Biden should definitely be using the bully pulpit more. I think that, you could make that case for the way that he's going to work with Republicans or Democrats. This is setting aside what I think is misplaced fetishism of bipartisanship in the first place, which is, what Joe Biden ran on. So he obviously values that. A lot of voters value that, or at least, the kumbaya sentiments that it nuzzles within them. I think that if he used the bully pulpit more, I think that it could at least stir up public pressure the way that we've seen a few times in the past few years. Obviously, Trump didn't use the bully pulpit when the ACA was about to be repealed, but Democratic lawmakers sure as hell did. And I think that they were able to stir up enough public pressure, get people to scream bloody murder, and that's what pushed that back. There's not a lot of margin for that, obviously. The margins are very, very thin. There are very few Republicans who would conceivably work with Democrats on anything. There are, probably about the same number of Democrats who would jump ship on a party line bill. And I think that the only real option on the table is to drum up a lot of pressure to try to push those people in one direction or the other. And it is maddening to see that that's not happening, not only from Joe Biden, but I think that, other lawmakers I'd like to see using that more too, raising more hell than they are. And I think it's been disappointing not to see as much of that as I would have liked to.
Well, I mean, there's been lots of reports that Joe Manchin and Sinema are offering cover to other lawmakers that, if a filibuster were to go away, would suddenly be part of, whatever version of the IBC would be in the Senate, Democrats who are suddenly siding with Republicans. But I mean, what better way to show your bipartisanship, Napoleon, than actually getting rid of the filibuster? Because then you're going to be forced, if the Democrats lose, or vice versa, you're forced to show, you can come together on really important deals like, I don't know, infrastructure, which never used to be something that was controversial, but now is.
Right. I mean, like Biden, I think he tends to want to hide behind decorum. He uses that to not do anything courageous or not to, and I think it's gonna be to his detriment. I think like people want to see him actually like I agree with what Natalie says, like put pressure and use the bully pulpit. That's the type of energy that people want. They want something to get behind, and everybody seems to just be. I mean, I'm character as I'm exaggerating, but like just watching idly. You know what I'm saying? Just. Nobody's really taking a stand and really trying to like really push whatever they believe in.
Well, what frustrates me is I just feel like we're on the verge of the republic collapsing. And like, how they do these data models, and like you kind of know the data about what's happening, and you can look at different countries that are on the verge of collapse, and there's certain key points that factors that have to be at play. They have to hit a certain point, and then this has to hit a certain point, whatever it is, democracy in decline, or, income inequality and all. And I feel like we all know it. And yet we're just sitting, we're having climate conversations. And I just don't understand. I would love to look back at this in 30 years and be like, we were right, but we're not going to be around in 30 years. And so I feel like the show is just constantly venting about how, it's going to come down to what, 2 people in the Senate? And I don't mean Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. I mean Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. Is that where the pressure needs to be applied? Is Chuck Schumer able to feel shame, or what other type of pressure needs to be applied? I mean, these coalitions do come together and pressure lawmakers all the time so that they do get moved. But do we need to apply pressure to Chuck Schumer to, I don't know, control the Senate that he controls? Because I assume he still wants to be in power. Anybody, Natalie?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Great. Sounds good. How about all those organizations that showed up at Nancy Pelosi's office? Maybe do it at Chuck Schumer's office, or, convince him to come to some karaoke event and sing New York songs. And then really it's a trap.
I mean, anything to put a mirror to their face at this point. I mean, at least we'll get the visceral satisfaction of having a reaction from them, because it just seems like nobody cares and nobody's stepping up to the plate. And like you said, this is like looking like, I don't know, like late stage capitalism, whatever word you want to throw in, but something is wrong, and it feels like something is going down, and nobody is like stepping up to the plate.
I feel like the movement's also exhausted, and we're not coming up with the creative ideas that we may have been coming up with a few years ago. But we could totally trap Chuck Schumer. What's your best idea, Natalie? What's the best way to trap Chuck Schumer into shame?
It really put me on the spot with that.
Okay, I'll come up with one real quick.
Chuck Schumer. Okay, we're gonna carry around a big net like they would in a cartoon, hide in a bush, get out and throw it over him, drag him over, and make him listen to us.
I mean, it's very obvious.
Do that to a sitting lawmaker, just to be clear.
Listen, I'll get arrested for protesting on the Capitol Hill. Why not do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff is very important and that people should be doing it. It does concern me that in light of the ocean on fire, I think the same week there were also massive prison sentences announced at the federal level for people who had protested at Standing Rock. There are a bunch of charges leveled at a protest, I think, for some sort of climate change related, sorry, off the top of my head, some sort of fossil fuel project in Massachusetts, I think. there have just been some charges leveled. We're going to need to fight back against that sort of, draconian, overzealous sentencing too. But yeah, we all need to sub in and sub out in terms of movement building.
I love that. Sub in, sub out. Okay.
I feel like we're in the upside down world because like the people that are wrecking the planet, they're rich, they're living nicely. And the people that are trying to help and make a difference to get in jail, they're suffering, they get harassed and humiliated. And it's like, is the problem, like I ask myself, is the problem the politicians or the system? Because it seems like, I don't know, like something has to give somewhere.
Right. I mean, obviously these are systemic issues that are deeply rooted and kind of manifested, over time in the worst ways possible. But with that being said, Chuck Schumer is in a position of power and he's not somebody that can easily swap out overnight. It doesn't mean it's not doable, but it is, he's in a position of power in which he has earned over the years. And I feel like all you have to do is get him on board with some sort of really popular thing, invite him to the press conference and just be like, just kidding. Because he loves to show up at press conferences to take credit for really popular issues. Or he's also known for matchmaking. I'm trying to think like you're a CIA agent, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that anyone on the broader left can do in the short term within the next few years that could actually change the balance of power in the United States, given all the obstacles, is passing the PRO Act.
100%.
Yeah, that makes unions stronger. It makes it easier to organize. That's the only option, I think, for changing the power dynamic in the United States is a stronger labor movement, and the PRO Act is going to be how we get there. So
absolutely.
If Chuck Schumer wants to sit at that press conference and brag about it, I welcome him. Great.
That sounds great.
That's
not a trap.
I'd be up for that.
I'm thinking low-hanging fruit, Natalie. You're like bringing it back to thought. I'm like, get him on something because oh my gosh, he's so well known for these press conferences where he shows up and he's renaming a street after some hero that everybody loves, or banning bath salts. That was his big crusade a few years ago. He's running around the stage just banning bath salts, and he's never met a camera he doesn't love. So just bring on a bunch of cameras, stage him outside of his office. We declare National Chuck Schumer Day. He shows up, and then we put a net on his head. And then we say, you better call Kirsten Sinema right now and say, we are running a primary against you if you don't. No?
Somebody needs to set up. We can set up a jumbo screen in front of that Congress with that image of the whirlpool or that fire pit whirlpool. That'll bring the cameras out. They'll have to look at it,
Let's get some of these billionaires. How there are these new billionaires who are like love criticizing the billionaire class and they just like go on Twitter and criticize it all day long and write op-eds. How about you take some of that money and put it into shame exercises too? Just some few little thoughts here. Okay, I want to shift gear. Sorry, I could go on this path forever and come up with different ideas, but we do have to think, move forward and think what's to come. And Ron DeSantis, speaking of climate change and Republicans not getting it and rich people being able to get out of, climate change, Florida. What better example? I mean, to me, this is like, as a political messenger, this is a perfect space where you could move Republicans against a Republican on climate change, because poll-wise, at least, in Southern Florida, there are Republicans in Southern Florida who totally believe in climate change because they see it every day, but yet still vote for DeSantis, still vote for Rubio. So we need, I don't know, there's a lot of work here to connect the dots, but let's play this clip of Ron DeSantis because people think that he's going to be the one running against Joe Biden on the Republican ticket or the nominee.
Mark, what is your sense? I mean, it's so interesting to watch DeSantis, too, because obviously when he was first elected governor, everyone was surprised. A lot of people didn't take him seriously in the beginning. They thought, some of the things that he said were too right wing or not enough in the mainstream. He clearly has evolved. I mean, watching him with President Biden and saying thank you is the way that he approached that, a much more traditional way of doing things in a big, what has been historically a swing state like Florida, and seems to acknowledge that, you know, he's growing in ways that understand he would need a broader appeal if he actually did want to make a national bid. I mean, what's your take on how DeSantis has handled himself and changed in this role? And I mean, and he's got to now lead the state through, of course, this awful Surfside collapse and impending tropical weather.
I don't know if he's changed so much, but yes, for those of us who have observed him kind of govern very much on the right wing, the fact that he was quite welcoming of the president and was not political at all did surprise a lot of people here.
Yeah. All right. Mark Caputo, thank you very much for getting up early with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Mark Caputo is a well-known Florida reporter, always giving you the insider information. All right. I mean, I say like we need to start thinking this way, but the reality is I think the media has been distracting us with Trump and Trump's reelect, and who knows, he still might do it. But we got to start thinking. Progressives, especially in a state like Florida, need to start thinking about what to do. Right? How do we make sure we don't lose Florida? I'm not even talking about with Biden. I'm talking about just taking over some of the legislature in Florida so that we don't have what has happened in the DeSantis term in the last 2 years continue. I mean, same thing in Texas and Arizona. I mean, there's multiple states like this where there's an opportunity to win locally so that DeSantis doesn't get credit for these sweeping pieces of legislation. Like, what is the one that he signed where 3 people is a mob and you get arrested if you're protesting 3 people? What? These things are all going to go to the Supreme Court. So, Natalie, centrist Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I mean, you know, something you said a minute ago, I think is important when you said, you know, people in South Florida vote Republican, but they do believe in climate change. I think, I mean, you know, maybe at the individual voter level, who knows, but the Republican Party believes in climate change. OK, like they're not stupid. They're not yokels. I feel like a lot of the liberals have framed it as, you know, we believe science, or, you know, as if anti-climate change politics have been a triumph of ignorance. And they're not. I mean, that's been a very conscious propaganda campaign. What they're not doing is facing climate change because it would upend the basis of the economic system, right? Like, that's what they don't want to confront. That's what they have to be pushed to confront. I think that, you know, right now, they're still not going to be on the lefty or progressive side with climate change because they're going to hope for, you know, state capitalism. They want to just keep doing what they're doing and get massive housing subsidies for people who bought waterfront property, et cetera. We have different ideas about how to organize things. And, you know, I think that as with all organizing, that has to be done from the ground up. You know, we have to make inroads in Florida, find the people on the ground, organize, go door to door. You know, I don't have ties to Floridians doing that, but certainly, you know, groups like the Democratic Socialists of America and some of their allies, I hope, are doing that on the groundwork because, you know, we need a lot of non-voters and we need a lot of Trump voters. We just need to basically reorient their anger and resentments away from critical race theory and vaccines and whatever else is being drubbed up on hot Fox News and tilt it back toward the people who are getting rich off the fact that there's a fire in the ocean.
Right. There's fire in the ocean. Buildings are collapsing. You know, the list goes on and on. Tornadoes are hitting. A hurricane's about to hit again in Florida. We know what's happening. But I'm so glad you mentioned distraction because, I mean, this is, I think the Trump thing is a distraction. I think, you know, a lot of these issues, Republicans are so great at distraction. And of course, the media is so great at picking up on it. And of course, the left falls for it all the time, which we'll get to in a second. Does it seem the same in Germany? Like when you're watching Germany, there's a reason I'm asking this because I'm not trying to model ourselves after Europe, but I have noticed a visible difference in how people respond to crisis slowly too here in the EU, and obviously every country is different. But I was like shocked every time I travel, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this. I get shocked out of my system, shocked out of the Twitter fights and the this and that, and then there's suddenly this perspective that you get just with distance and you know different communication and different news and everything, but just the rhythm of conversation and politics. While we're so fast paced in our country because of the news cycle and because of the way the Republican Party is constantly shifting the goalposts and everybody else's as well. Simultaneously, we're not dealing with anything, which is, I think, kind of the theme of the show. We're not dealing with anything. So, Napoleon, like, from your perspective as an American, as somebody who is abroad, like, how does it appear to you? Is this is it just one distraction after other? And then comment on DeSantis if you'd like.
I mean, I just feel like, as far as the collective, it's like, let's even talk about, like, you know, when it came for the COVID crisis, like there was like, it's more of a buy-in with people, like, had to understand it. It's the same thing when we talk about, like, climate change. People have an understanding. They know we have to come together. It's not to say that there aren't no extreme factions that are really that politicize the thing and talk about masks and things like that. I'm not going to say I'm an expert and I'm at the pulse of what's going on there, but I just don't feel that all that pointless infighting, like you said, there's a lot of noise. Seems like there's a lot of noise in America and nothing is getting done. Like, it just feels more like it's a functioning state where people are actually trying to get things done. When it comes to America, it's funny, even when I watched that little segment, there's the argument this guy gives that DeSantis is, like, moving to the center is that he said thank you to Joe Biden. Like,
I know, it's ridiculous.
What did he expect him to do? Throw a tomato at him? Like these guys, like, do we know they're politicians? They're playing a game, but when they come together in a room, they laugh and drink champagne. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's so stupid and so pointless. But once again, like, in places like Florida, like, I suspect it's a lot of the cultural issues that make people vote one way or the other. People vote with their eyes. They vote with their feelings, like whatever they feel culturally makes sense to them. And I think what it's going to take is to paint a different picture of society and make people buy in. Like, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to say, but like Natalie's saying, when we're talking about labor, when we're talking about everybody wants better conditions at their work, they want things more fair. There's a majority of people that are struggling. More people are doing worse than people doing good. So we need to speak directly to them. And we're not going to get everybody, but we could get a substantial amount for actually to have better people inside these seats of power, whether it's local or whether it's on the national level.
Well, and it's interesting because Florida, just as an example, like, they passed the $15 minimum wage. You know, there's a great opportunity for, and that's in a state that is a right to work state. So it used to be that labor, you know, really mobilized, and they did. I'm not saying that they don't have, there's no labor in Florida, but they're definitely not as powerful as they used to be. And so it used to be labor that was really pushing most of these initiatives and using them to pressure lawmakers. But when you don't have, going back to the PRO Act, why PRO Act is so important is, you know, giving the power back to labor so they can rebuild, simultaneously as more people are organizing locally and on the ground and taking over legislatures, more progressives are running, so they can hold somebody like a DeSantis accountable. I mean, he's able to get away with what he's able to get away with because he's got a legislature that's completely checked out the same way he is. And so organize. But I say stay focused because let's stir up this Lauren Boebert thing. I have a real, I'm only bringing her up to make a point. So let's stir up this tweet by Lauren Boebert. She's a representative with the guns, remember? She's from Colorado. She's the gun bar. COVID-19 mutated into communism a long time ago. This is what she tweeted this morning. Okay. I bring this up because, of course, she did this to get attention. Of course, she did this because she knew it would inflame the left. Of course, she did this because maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene's getting more attention than she is, and, you know, whatever. But there's also fundraising. People don't do these things nowadays. Lawmakers don't do these things anymore unless they have, I mean, some of them are a little crazy and they just do it, but there's always, it's like, does it have legs? It used to be you did some sort of press thing to get attention and make sure that there was an article out of it, there was a segment out of it, there was a fight over it, which turned into another article, another segment. Oh, there's a fundraising opportunity. We could send some emails out of that. You know, all sorts of things you can do out of one action. And it's just so much easier now with Twitter. She could say something like that, and then it escalates and escalates and escalates. And so based on our previous conversation, I am just going to go, you guys can agree or disagree, we'll go around. I feel like the left is falling, including myself right now, is falling for these distractions a little bit too much and not staying focused because energy is finite. and where are we using our energy right now? So, Natalie.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this on your show before. It's really hard because I do think, things like, Donald Trump tweets things to get a reaction. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweets things to get a reaction. Lauren Boebert tweets things to get a reaction. The idea is to stir people up and then do a Fox News segment about how there are different sides and get people to like reflexively be defensive of their side, et cetera. And it would be great if people just stopped reacting to these things, but it's very untenable to release a memo to millions of individuals on Twitter to not have a reaction to this, to not cover what elected officials are saying on public channels. Like, you can't not react to these things. It's driven by individuals, and social media makes this stuff 1,000 times worse. And I feel like it's just a problem we are stuck with. There is no way out of that. So, you have to figure out how to counter it, because I think that don't react to X it's not possible. Not going to happen.
This reminds me of those DCCC emails, which we still get, which are like breaking news, like emergency. But what I'm specifically talking about, okay, maybe I should, obviously the internet's going to internet, but there are organizations that we give money to. And I open up my emails now, and some of the more progressive ones are Marjorie Taylor Greene declares war on AOC. And it's like, oh my God, it's the new version of a DCCC email. That's what I'm feeling. And I don't know how we get past it. It worries me personally as we go into midterms that this is kind of where the conversation is steering. Is this AOC versus Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert versus whoever she's targeting? I don't know what the dynamics are with the squad, and but this isn't high school.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of like the entertainment industry. I see it all the time, and trolling works, and it's like, you want to tell people to be smarter than that, but you yourself have a personal reaction, and you can't stop the mob, the masses from having a reaction to these things. And I think I tweeted something about it like a few weeks ago about we stuck in the conundrum, how to not be reactionary to the reactionaries. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's a tough game to break, because it works. It just works. And on top of that, you're dealing with algorithms, you're dealing with social media companies that they make their money and they get their reach and attention off beefs and conflicts and infighting. All I see on Twitter is infighting now. It's like,
oh, I know.
It's not information. It's all I see. And I'm just like, I get it. It tires me out, because I'm like, who cares? Like, this doesn't even matter. And we're making it feels like WWF, like every time, even when we're talking about politics now, it's like it's seeped into politics. And I honestly, I just want to tell people to be smarter than that, and just stay focused, stay on message. And that's how we're going to win. Like, this is just straight distractions. Let's call it distraction for what it is. And let's realize that is just a waste of time. It's just like an ego, little exercise that you're doing. It's not moving the ball forward, and we got to keep people focused. And it's difficult.
Yeah. If large left media networks don't respond to troll media networks, the trolls don't continue to grow, and then that's just, we don't talk about it on our show anymore. I'll just say that. But every time I open up Twitter, I woke up this morning and I was just like, oh, cool, 3 of my friends are trending. And one person I used to be friends with is trending, because they're all fighting with each other. But, of course, those beefs are money. And those segments are segments that we could be discussing, how to pressure Joe Manchin, how to trap Chuck Schumer. Let's come up with the ideas. Listen,
let's build
we'll
a stronger
do the crazy
army.
ideas. They do the beef. I'm not. It's high school. Yeah.
How can we coordinate something? Let's coordinate together. Everybody has such we all have influence, and we could coordinate and use our energy for better things. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah. But do you think big media covers tweets like this?
The Lauren Boebert one? Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. All the time. They make all their money off of it.
If they're covering tweets like this, how could we, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be hard to ignore, you know what I mean?
They'll definitely cover it if AOC responds. And so from my perspective, I'm just the progressives are weak feedback, and then they feed off of us. But they will, it doesn't mean they're going to go away, but Obviously, January 6th happened. It didn't mean that like QAnon doesn't live in their own little universe, not responding. But you know, Trump feeds off of the fights, and Trump's gone now, and these people feed off the fights, but they're not as strong as Trump. Yeah.
At one point, when you're talking about like Germany, for example, like I don't feel like politics is entertainment over here. It might be, but I'm not all the way into it, obviously. But it's definitely entertainment in America, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, you know, our former president was a reality show star. So it would be Ukraine. I mean, there's plenty of places that works. Natalie Shure, final thoughts? Demise of the Republic. How many days do you think we have left?
I've got some fun summer plans. So let's hope that there are at least 45 or 50.
I can't wait to hear.
The ocean should not be on fire. We got to fix this.
Yes. Sounds great. Napoleon?
Oh, yeah. More music. They're working on more
music.
You
think we'll still have a republic when I get back from Greece? That's my question.
I hope
Let's start taking bets.
I think so.
Also, screw capitalism that I can't have a vacation while I'm here. I love you guys, but the show dies if we don't air it. That's how this works. The algorithm just goes... So we got to continue. Appreciate you, everything you do. Thanks, Napoleon. Thanks, Natalie. Thank you, Brad, producer Brad, who's been dealing with my tech issues all day. Thank you to everybody for listening, for watching. And if you are not already, join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. You get just as much content as you did before. We moved to this new format, Wednesday nights and Friday nights, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And Fridays are Femme Fridays still. So there you go. You just get more femme. You get double the femme. That's how this works. All right. Thank you to everybody. Stay in solidarity, and we will see you on Friday.
The Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system. Unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue. Talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.